Here we have the JTS Standard, but this adjustment also works on the JTS AIRACUDA Max. They have identical trigger systems. What you'll need for a tool is a 1.5 millimeter Allen, preferably long, to adjust the two screws. They're located through the two slots on the bottom of the gun. The forward slot here is for the sear overlap, which can be adjusted down through this hole, like so. The second adjustment is the first stage take up, which is here, which can be adjusted down through this slot, like so. Now, if you adjust either one of these screws, you must readjust the other one. They work in unison, so always remember that. And if you don't see the screw, when you look through here on the sear overlap, it's behind the safety. Okay, so it could be hidden. So a lot of people might not even know it's there. Okay, so for ease of explanation, I'll be removing the stock off the gun and looking through the sear window so we can explain things in greater detail. Okay, here the JTS AIRACUDA is removed from its stock. We used the 5 millimeter Allen and loosen the stock screw up and remove the stock. It's the same principle on the Standard or the Max. And all these adjustments on the trigger are identical to the Standard and Max also. Okay, so as we can see here, here's our trigger group. Here is our sear window, our safety, our trigger, and of course our cocking lever. If we cock the lever back, we can look through the sear window and watch the sear climb up and then set down. Now we're in the fire ready position with the safety off. This is safety on. This is safety off. To decock it, we had pulled the lever back. While holding it back, we would squeeze the trigger and then slowly let the handle come forward. Now, if this gun's out of adjustment, that procedure right there can actually cause the gun to fire. So we'll go over how to properly adjust it and how to improperly adjust it also. Okay, so there's two screws. And using a 1.5 millimeter Allen, we can adjust the two screws. This screw here in the back is the first stage take-up screw. So that adjusts how much first stage there is before we hit the sear wall and then fire the gun. Now, a lot of people don't know that there is also another screw, and it is forward of the trigger down in here, also using the 1.5 millimeter Allen, and that screw adjusts the sear overlap, which we just saw. So that forward screw adjusts how much overlap we have when we cock the gun. So as we can see, right now we have a fair amount of overlap, very safe. This gun is degassed, so we can safely pull the trigger. And if we pull the trigger slowly, you can see the sear fall. Now we can adjust that overlap so it's just barely on there. And then in a very unsafe situation where if you bump the gun against anything, it would go off. This gives it a hair trigger. So we want to make sure we have a good amount of overlap. And you can feel the overlap when you're pulling the trigger. You'll get to the bottom of the first stage, and then you'll feel the overlap. And then you get to a point where it breaks. And that's when the gun fires. So let's get into the adjustments itself, the correct way and the incorrect way of doing this. Okay, we have our 1.5 millimeter in through the hole at the bottom that allows us to adjust the sear overlap. So we're going to go ahead and do that and give you a good visual of that happening. Once again, this gun is degassed. There's no pressure in it. So here we are with a good amount of sear overlap. As you can see, we are in the fire position other than the safety being on. And to adjust the sear overlap, the safety must be on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start tightening up the sear overlap until we get some adjustment here. Let me get this on the screw. There we go. And here we go with our adjustment. We're turning it slowly. And we can see now that our sear engagement is getting smaller and smaller. And we're doing that by turning this clockwise. Now we're getting to the point where we have very little overlap, and bumping this gun could possibly cause it to go off. So right now we're in a fairly unsafe situation. We still have just a hair, just a tiny little bit of first stage. So anytime you adjust the sear overlap, it also takes up first stage adjustment. And we must have first stage adjustment. Otherwise, the gun can go off while decocking. So never adjust this so much that you lose all your first stage. Now, if you adjust this sear overlap, you must come back and adjust your first stage take-up. So here we got very little, and we'll just back it out. Till we have more. And that's about as much as we're going to get because we over adjusted the sear. It's barely hanging on. We'll go ahead, take the safety off. It is barely on. Okay, this is not a safe situation at this point. If we go even more than this, while decocking the gun, it can actually go off. What'll happen is the hammer will hang up on top of the sear because it is tilted up so high. And then when you let off, you think that the hammer's coming down with it, but it's not. It's hanging up here. And when you seat this down, then it fires. So we must be very careful to not over adjust the sear. So let's go back, look at that. Okay. And let's readjust that sear overlap screw. Now I like to make my adjustments with the trigger in the non-fire state and then cock it. Okay, so now we got a lot more sear overlap, as you can see through the sear hole. And now we'll have more first stage. But let's keep going. Like I said, I always like to adjust it without a load on it. When you put a load on it and adjust it, you might not get the sear to move like it's supposed to because it's hanging up in there like it's supposed to. So we'll go ahead and drop this in there, get it back on there. We'll loosen her up. Sorry about the wiggling. It's all one-handed here. Okay, let's go ahead and cock it again. Okay, now we got a nice amount of sear engagement. And if we want more first stage, then we need to come back in here and adjust that first stage adjuster, or if we want less, then we need to do the same thing. So let's get that on the screw here. There we go. A little hard to do one-handed, folks. So we can add more first stage. That's the amount I personally like. A little over 1/8 of an inch. Or we can take it up. We have about 1/16 of an inch, but there always has to be some. So we're in a safe spot now. As you can see, when we pull the trigger, take the safety off, we can watch the first stage get taken up. And then we can watch the sear slide. And then once we get to the end, you can watch it break. There we go. So that basically tells us everything we need to know about the first stage sear take-up and the sear overlap. Now this screw right here, the first stage sear take-up, as you can see, I have it just above flush, and that's fine, or just slightly below flush is fine. But what I have seen is people using this adjustment to do what we shouldn't do, and that is adjust the sear. So let's get that on there. Once again, super hard to do. One-handed. Okay, so we got it on there. So we can actually adjust the sear overlap with this screw, which is extremely dangerous because it can make the gun go off in a variety of different ways. So we never want to do this. But this is how I see people do it because it's possible. So we'll just keep tightening it up. Let me keep this in focus here. And there she goes. She's getting smaller. Just creeping back. Okay, she's barely on the edge there now. And if we look through the hole now, you can see that the first stage take-up screw is way down in there. It should be close to flush in reality. So let's take the safety off. And then you'll see by this adjustment, there is no first stage anymore, 0. So now we've just put this gun in an extremely dangerous state. It could go off at any time, and decocking it can make it go off. So this is not good. There's absolutely no first stage, and we've tilted this sear up in the back where the hammer can hang on it on the forward travel. So we don't want to do that. So let's look down that hole again and see how far down there she is. So let's remedy that. Take it back up. Let's get it to flush or close to flush. Being a little down is okay, or a little up is okay. And now we cock it. We'll see we're back to a nice positive overlap and a good amount of first stage. And then we have our travel in our second stage, and fire. Okay. So if you adjust the sear overlap, you must come back and adjust the first stage travel to make sure you have enough first stage movement. Always inspect the first stage take-up screw so that's not too far down in there. I wouldn't go much more than a 1 full turn down at the most, because you can take up, like I said, some of the first stage up here, and some of it back here. So there's no reason to run that all the way down in there. So these two screws affect each other. It's a good system. It's simple, it's easy to adjust, and if you look at the window with the gun out of the stock, you can get a very good visual of what's going on. This is a nice benefit. Okay, folks, thank you very much, and be safe out there.